I hope that Amiga fans will be happy with 3 videos covering their favorite system released in such a short period. I know that I'm content, as I haven't made one in a while, working on those longer gaming history videos. Anyway, let's get on with it. Evil wizard Xandor, who has long grown tired with peaceful and just ruling of current king, Edelred, has infiltrated King's castle and poisoned him. With the ruler gone, the mad wizard will be free to take over the kingdom and do what he pleases with it. Fortunately, the king is not a weakling, and while poisoned and slowly dying, he's not gone yet. Luckily, there is an antidote. Unluckily, however, it's in the care of a wizard himself. So you, being the ultimate ass-kicker, badass and hero extraordinaire that you are, not to mention in-game king's son, decide to head to the wizard's castle and get the cure. Castle Warrior takes place over 6 levels and it's entirely viewed in third-person perspective from behind the back of our hero. And it's a mixture of arcade hack-and-slash adventure game and more modern than non-existent genre of runner games that were popularized by the smartphone boom of mid-2000s. With an exception that your character does not run on his own, he walks. Each level is unique and pretty unusual as compared to what was usually released in the late 80s. So you'll swim in canoe, run and even fly. Same as in most games in the genre though, every level ends with a boss. They all require pattern memorization and repetition to beat, so yeah. Castle Warrior's graphics are pretty good too, apparently using more than usual on the Amiga 32 colors. I haven't counted them myself, but judging on a face value it does look impressive with nice and well mixed palettes and large sprites. The scrolling / movement is a bit slow, but I suppose it's because Amiga had no hardware sprite scaling. All in all, Castle Warrior looks great and sounds interesting on paper, or when it's spoken about, but believe it or not, it's not very fun. It feels clunky, very Dragon Slayer-like, and it's not everyone's cup of tea. As prehistoric themed games go, Cavemania is terrible. It originated on ZX Spectrum before being ported to other systems. And while there's nothing wrong with Speccy itself, this game on the Amiga is just not worth your time. It is obscure though, so here we are. Well, first of all, Cavemania is a side-scrolling platformer in which you need to collect 3 dinosaur eggs per level and bring them back to your cave one by one without breaking, before you can move to the next stage. What's the point of that, you may wonder? No one knows. Perhaps our little protagonist wants to make the biggest scrambled eggs or omelette, perhaps he's a collector, or perhaps the reason is something else. I don't care, and I don't think that devs did either, as completing the game gives you a very unsatisfying congratulations screen. That's it. Why do I tell you about it rather than let you discover it on your own? Well, I'd like to spare you the pain and save you some time you could invest in something better than playing this game. Like scratching your ass, picking your nose or farting. Yep, all these are better use of your time and more fun. The controls are clunky to say the least, the jumping especially, and since jumping is like half of what most platformers are about, you see the issue here already, right? Then there are also bugs, that may, but don't have to, but may, but not necessarily will, but may still pop up here and there in various forms, even game breaking, leaving you without projectiles in the level that requires you to have them to complete it, for instance. Ugh. My take on Cavemania is, don't play it unless you actually do have some kind of a mania. Like maniacal behavior syndrome. Don't look it up, trust me, it exists. But if you really want to try the game out, keep in mind that I did warn you about it. Chariots of Wrath is odd. It really is. It's an action arcade fantasy adventure that mixes gameplay genres all throughout its 7 levels. As per usual in fantasy-themed games, villain of the game, in this particular case your arch-rival Evil Baron, kidnapped and holds a beautiful Princess Artina, your future queen. Because of course you're the prince and the future king of so-called Forgotten Kingdom. And it is. Forgotten, that is. Cause prior to working on this video I've never heard of it. So you're you, the hero, and you play as, well, you, the prince, and you have to save the princess. No surprises here, right? Standard fantasy fare so far. But what's unusual about Chariots of Wrath are the aforementioned genre blends. There's 5 of them in fact within the game's 7 levels. There's a first-person perspective Operation Wolf-like section where you shoot creatures invading the castle. Then there's Arkanoid / Breakout-like level, and it plays exactly how you expect it to, with all the bricks breaking, ball, paddle at the bottom, the works. It's just stylized in a medieval fashion. There's the vertical scrolling shoot-em-up bullet hell stage, but also fantasy-themed and worse than the classic. Chariots of Wrath wouldn't have been released in '89 if it didn't contain at least a single platforming stage, with the usual side-scrolling diamond collecting fare. And last but not least, there's also Asteroids-like level where you're in the middle of the screen destroying rocks coming from all sides. All those minigames alone are not great. They lack polish, substance, and are heavily simplified versions of their respective progenitors. But as a collection under one title on a single disc, they're actually pretty fun to play as the game never gets a chance to get stale. If you enjoy genre mashups, this one's not to miss. Mega Twins, aka Chiki Boys, is a port from arcades and actually an excellent title on the Amiga. And it's a fantasy-themed action platformer in vein of classic Wonder Boy in Monsterland. The peaceful land of Alren, I think we can all guess how this sentence ends, right? So said peaceful land has been invaded by the evil demon who sent a dragon that killed the king and released all kinds of nasty monsters onto the kingdom. The king had sons, however, twins to be precise, and they're out for revenge and out to clear the land of all evil. And you take control of one of these, or you and a friend, as Mega Twins can actually be played in simultaneous multiplayer. And if you get a chance, that's how you should experience it. Each of the brothers has different skills and strong suits. One is more skilled with a sword, which he's always wielding, while the other is gifted in magic. Both brothers collect coins as they go through the game killing monsters, and this can be spent in the shop to purchase extra life, more magic and better swords. There are 3 levels in the game: Earth, the Heavens and the Sea, and they can be tackled in any order. The first is a straight-up platformer, the second sends you into the skies platforming between the clouds, and finally third takes place underwater. When all 3 are completed, you get to go to the monster castle to defeat the demon that's caused all this commotion. Mega Twins looks, sounds and plays great. Could it be better? Easily. As Amiga's version is just a port from Atari ST with all the limitations of that hardware. So 16 colors only, no music, jerky scrolling, small play area and slow movement. But despite all that, it's still a really fun title. Clystron originated on C64, and there it was praised for its graphics and great music design. On Amiga it's, it's on the Amiga. There's nothing praiseworthy going for it though. Clystron is a sci-fi themed side-view action arcade platformer where you control a bipedal robot similar to that in Psygnosis' Walker, and have to collect 8 machine parts within given time limit. Whenever a part is uncovered and picked up, a new transporter/elevator location is unlocked and can be traversed to insert for the next one. While you're searching for this, a whole plethora of various enemies will attack you from both ground and flying, and you obviously have to dispose of them to be able to carry on. While the premise and presentation are not that bad, the game is seriously let down by clunky controls and uninspired gameplay. For starters, your robot keeps walking continuously. Press left and he will walk in that direction until you change it or stop him, despite any enemies or environmental dangers. It's uncomfortable, it's difficult to get used to, and never feels right, regardless how long you decide to waste on Clystron. Then there's shooting and jumping. You can do either, but not both at the same time, which causes a whole range of other issues. Finally, simply put, it's not very fun. It could be, but somehow it's just tiring. I suppose it's all this that caused Clystron to never gain any real popularity and remain largely unknown. And you know what? Good. Colonial Conquest II is like Civilization but with few notable and gameplay changing differences. But same as Civ, it's a turn-based 4x strategy, tackling, sustaining and progress of a human race. It does not take place on Earth however, but in space, where your typical for Sid Meier's series world map is replaced by a space sector display with various planets placed on it randomly. You can settle on these and build colonies. This can focus on food, mining and production or be a mixture of. You can erect various buildings in your colonies from houses and power plants, through universities, all the way to spaceports and ground defenses. Because yes, believe it or not, in space you're not alone. There's also aggressive and expansive race of sentient machines that does what it can to make your life more difficult, or to make sure that there's no life of yours to speak of, or squeak off, or hum off, or beep off. I really don't know how these machines communicate. Fortunately, you can manufacture a whole set of various ships too, ranging from colony ships through fighters and large destroyers to huge battle stars. So if you carefully divide your attention between available options of building, research and warfare, and micromanage your planets well, you should be fine in defending against the toasters. Keep in mind, however, that there can only be 28 buildings on each planet, so it's good to plan ahead rather than erect them willy-nilly without any real strategy in mind. Colonial Conquest II is excellent, and if you're a fan of a genre and never heard of it, you're in for a fun next few days. I realized that by releasing those Obscure Amiga Games videos, I often shed light on games that actually should remain forgotten. Games that deserve their status and place in the chasm of obscurity. And I feel that Corsarios may be one of these. It's a pirate-themed side-scrolling beat-em-up that fails on basically all fronts. and it could be really fun as there's not many games in a genre set in Caribbean. Graphics are just awful, the characters are unimpressively designed and repeat often, not to mention that their sprites seem to have just a few frames of animation, making the whole fair feel even jerkier than it already does. Then there are hitboxes, which feel exactly like that, like boxes, that go way beyond characters' physique, so that when you hit or hit someone yourself, it feels as if all kicks and punches connect at a distance. It's odd looking, difficult to work around and unpleasant to play to say the least. Scrolling is jerky and any action you take, walking included, seems to have 2-3 frames of animation at most. Overall, presentation-wise, Corsarios is literally painful to witness in its low-color glory. There's no music and sounds are sporadic and mismatched. For instance, your character's falling sound when he's hit or drops from height is what I could only describe as 8-bit explosion. And gameplay? Oh my days, ladies and gentlemen, there isn't any. You never feel as if the punches and kicks that you make would connect, regardless if they actually do or not. There's literally 2, maybe 3 different moves and they're not very impressive given the limited frame budget. And Corsarios just feels like a punishment. To the point that I wanna take a second here to discourage anyone considering checking it out from doing so. Trust me, it's not worth it. Custodian is a side-view action shooter, and it's not an easy game. To the point that by the time you figure out what and how to do in it, you'll probably die a dozen times or so already. It can feel discouraging, and I get that, cause I'm one of those gamers who hates dying without clearly understanding why, and known to drop games if the first impressions of them are lackluster. But apparently, it's worth persevering with Custodian. Apparently. The game is composed out of 3 tombs, 3 levels if you will, and you will have to defend those tombs from energy-draining parasites. You do so by collecting the pods that the aliens are using to drain and destroy them in a special annihilation chamber. Alien parasites are not very keen on that, so they attack you while you go about it. And obviously you have to defend yourself as best as you can, cause if you're gone, the mission is a failure and all energy will be lost. There's up to 20 randomly placed pods in each stage, and if they're not removed in a timely manner, they grow and evolve, becoming more and more difficult to get rid of. You start the game with 1000 credits that you can use to purchase weapons, and you get more of these, money not weapons, by killing aliens and collecting pods. Weapons are purchased at ammunition silos scattered around the tombs. And it's worth pointing out that it's good to have a couple of them at hand, as different aliens are more or less sensitive to different kinds of weapons. When all pods are destroyed, you have to face the final boss of each stage, the so-called Guardian, that is much more demanding than your usual alien parasite scam. Custodian is not bad per se, it's just misunderstood by most gamers, especially that it doesn't tell you much of its inner workings, so I can imagine people playing it with no weapons or ammo wondering what they do wrong rather than just going to the silo to resupply. So give it a go and let me know what you think about it. Cyberkick is a side-view flip-screen sci-fi action platformer. Judging by the title, you probably expected lean, tall and well-built humanoid robots kicking ass. And what you've got is, well, how to put it nicely, not exactly that. See for yourself. The main character looks like an overweight Futurama's Bender wannabe, whose one and only attack move seems to be low shin kick. It looks as unimpressive as it's possible and not threatening in any way. More like a modern dance move rather than the deadly attack. Appearances are deceiving though, and not only set kick is threatening, I'd say it's the deadliest weapon in the whole game, possibly known universally. I mean, just take a look at all those enemies dying from it, often in a pool of blood. But questionable animation/graphical choices aside, the presentation itself is actually pretty good. There's nothing really I could complain about, the game's pleasant to look at, sounds are okay and the music is really good for what it is. Perhaps the video does not give it away, but the soundtrack is rather stellar. Cyberkick takes place on a renegade space base on Mars, where your goal is to collect all radioactive containers and carry them to the recycling stations. Wow, the theme is kinda similar to the previous game we spoke about, isn't it? Collect stuff, carry it somewhere, dispose of it, rinse and repeat. Anyway, as you go about it, navigating hostile halls and corridors of the base, filled with traps, electric barriers, sharp blades and whole plethora of other environmental dangers, you'll also be attacked by various enemies, like alien creatures, drones, mechs, tanks and many more. And yes, you can beat them all with a funky dance move. Cyberkick is not the most ambitious, creative or even fun game to play on the Amiga, but it's one that you could very well complete once and not feel as if the time was wasted. It's hardly a recommendation, but let's keep in mind how bad those obscure games can be. Darkman is a side-view action-adventure platformer/beat-em-up based on the movie of the same title, and another sadly excellent example of botched attempt at a movie tie-in. Don't get me wrong though, it's not unplayable or one of the worst games on the Amiga, nowhere near that, it's just a wasted opportunity for something bigger and better. Darkman is composed out of 6 arcade stages, scenes if you will, roughly following the plot of the movie. Most of them are side-view beat-em-up platformers with an emphasis on the beat-em-up, but there are some outliers that take entirely different approach, like the helicopter level for instance, in which you fly over highway hanging from a chopper and avoiding traffic. It's a nice change of pace. From what I can tell, the beat-em-up bits have only 2 attacks, punch and a dance kick, very similar to the famous Michael Jackson dance move, during which he pulls up his pants and kicks with one leg. You know, the attack from the Moonwalker on Sega Genesis. But Moonwalker was a much better game and we shouldn't really talk about it here. As long as you keep mashing button, attacking, no enemy will ever be able to come near you, which would be acceptable design in some early beat-em-ups on 8-bit systems, but in 1991 on Amiga it was a serious design flaw that made the game bland and boring. Graphics are not great for the most part, with enemies looking as if they were using just a few sprites cycling different color palettes to represent different foes. Backgrounds are a mixed bag too, some being decent while others are just crap. I suppose the main character's animation is the only redeeming factor to the presentation, as it's pretty good. Overall, Darkman is not great. It's not bad enough for me to discourage you from playing, but I don't see you completing it more than once on one of those lazy, slow and boring autumn afternoons. And with this video we've done 3 episodes of Obscure Amiga Games in 1 week. Something that does not happen often and won't be the new norm for as long as I'm employed where I am. But since I'm fresh out of hospital and have to remain at home recovering, I was able to pull it off. All that aside, did any of the games look particularly interesting to you? Are there any obscure titles you'd like me to cover as no one seems to know about them but you? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. If you didn't, well then there's thumbs down there too. But I suppose you wouldn't have persevered up to this point if you really didn't. Around 60% of you are not subscribed and there's currently no way of knowing if YouTube will decide to recommend you the next episode or not, other than subscribing and hitting that bell, that is. And when you hit that bell, whenever the new video is out, YouTube will actually send you a small and friendly notification about it, so you wouldn't miss it. If you'd like to support the channel, Patreon and YouTube memberships are a great way of doing so. They will help me release better content and also they get first dibs on all new videos before they're publicly accessible on YouTube. If you can't or don't want to do that though, likes and subscribes are great too. I would like to take a moment here and thank all the YouTube creators from whose videos short bits were taken to serve as a background to my commentary. They're amazing and stars among the retro community. You will find names of their channels at the top of the screen when their footage is running and also in the video description below. For me though, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time. Peace.